On Halloween night in 1999, I remember it was a Saturday that year because I was a 22-year-old bartender at the time and every time that Halloween fell on a weekend like this, we knew we were going to have a night off. At that moment, chaos surrounded me. I lived in Morgantown, West Virginia. Halloween was always a great event for students, especially seniors. They were old enough to buy alcohol. And we were organizing costume contest. Let's make cocktails on the theme. The horror we spread. Horror movies about them. TV bars, that is. It was set to be a grand affair, especially since Halloween coincided with a lively Saturday that year, promising a dynamic blend of locals and university students alike. The evening was going to be quite lively, one of the biggest Halloween parties the bar has ever seen. Naturally, I was very excited to the idea of living this evening. So imagine my disappointment when, on the same day, my boss calls me to ask me a favor. My boss is his associate owned various bars and restaurants, and one of them was in the Fairmont, about 15 miles south of Morgantown. They had met at staff class this Saturday, October 31st, and my boss asked me to go there to work in the evening. As a bartender, I could have said no, asked him to go with it. Anybody else? However, I understood that helping him out with this favor would ultimately place me in an excellent spot for requesting time off during the Christmas holidays. So I said yes. I chose the most stylish shirt and pants I could find, since the place was so much more upscale than the bar where I worked, and I myself go to the work around 3:20 to install their bar. My reasoning was that it couldn't be too difficult since the establishment tends to shut down around 11 p.m., and the kitchen crew assured me that most patrons typically depart by 11:40 p.m. I figured I could drive home and then go to the bar to enjoy. From the last hours of Halloween in person, lambda, my shift is stretched more than expected, more when it finally ended. I eagerly hopped into my vehicle and proceeded to Morgantown, a journey I had already planned to undertake. I had to go back to Route 79, as I had done before in the past, but this time I was in Fairmont, taking Route 79. It meant retracing my steps, so I figured it would be quicker to take Route 19 and then go a different route. This probably means nothing to people who don't know the area, so let's just say I took a shortcut. But that choice turned out to be a big mistake. The roads were much more winding and much less well lit, so every time I was paying attention to the road and trying to maintain my driving, I didn't feel too safe. I drove about 80 to 90% of the way to Morgantown, always driving carefully. I was super focused, paying attention to the road, telling myself it was dangerous. Suddenly, a car appeared in my headlights. She was on the side of the road, on a patch of grass. She didn't move, and the passenger door was open. A man approaches the passenger door, glances at me briefly as I pass him. A look that makes me think he might need help. I could have kept driving, pretended I didn't see anything, and drove back to Morgantown. But part of me knew I was going to feel like a real coward the next day, leaving someone stranded on the side of the road and thinking only of me. So I slowed down. I turned around and came back to see if the guy really needed help. I'm not going to lie to you. It occurred to me that turning back might have been a bad idea. It was Halloween after all, the scariest night of the year. But I figured if I pulled over and the guy looked like an axe murderer, I could just back up and drive off before he turns my skin into a mask or something. I knew the person was wearing some kind of white short-sleeve shirt, so I'll look for it when I approach to see it through my headlights. But when I stopped, he was gone. There was someone in the passenger seat of the car. I kept some distance, opened my car door and leaned out. I called her to see if she was okay. She didn't answer. She kept looking away, as if she couldn't hear me. She seemed fine, so I got out of my car and went to her. But with every step I took toward the car, I realized that something was wrong with the woman I was looking at. There was something in that look, that half-awake, glassy look, and before I even opened the door, I realized that she might not even be conscious. I realized that if I had parked my car at a different angle, I would have seen it long before I approached her. But I had to wait until I was close to the car, where I could almost touch her, to realize she was dead. Someone had stabbed her again and again in the stomach, then in the thighs. His t-shirt was a dark color that didn't show it, but his jeans were completely soaked with blood. I couldn't believe what I was watching for a second. I mean, there was so much blood coming out of the seat and onto the floor of the car. I don't know if that's where she was killed or if someone put her on the seat like that, but I remember she looked incredibly peaceful. Not peaceful like she was happy, but peaceful, like she chose to give up at some point. I remember being frozen for what seemed like a good few seconds. But that may be because my mind was pumped with adrenaline that made it feel like it was longer than it was. Because I sure as hell stood there too long. Then another thought occurred to me. Where was the man I had seen? The one in the white shirt? I still remember how that question sent chills down my spine. I'm not just saying this to say how scared I was. Yes, I was scared, but I could really feel it. It was like I could really feel the terror running through me. And when I turned back to my car, I prayed that I wouldn't see him near the car, that he wouldn't stand there blocking the road before I got away. I couldn't see it, but you must remember I left my car running with the lights on. And you know, I was looking at the dark spots around the headlights, thinking they might be right there, and I couldn't see it. Just looking over my shoulder made me feel incredibly vulnerable and weak, so I walked back to the car. But then I saw something that startled me. There was a tree line only 15 meters from the car, and even with my night vision, ruined by the glare of the headlights, I saw something pale moving between the tree trunks. It was the man in the white shirt, that was for sure. He was watching me in the dark. I'm still not 100% sure it was really him. But I didn't stick around to find out if my worst suspicions were true, or to check if he stabbed that poor girl. There was no telling what he would have done to me to eliminate a potential witness. I ran to my car and put my escape plan into action. I felt a deep relief when I pressed the accelerator pedal. Needless to say, I didn't go out that night. I drove back to my apartment, called the police and stayed on the phone waiting for them to arrive. Then I told them what I had seen, what kind of car I thought it was, what the woman looked like, the exact stretch of road I'm on at that moment. And once they finished taking notes, they passed them on to their superiors. And from what I could figure out, the goal was to get another patrol car out of town to find the place I was talking about. And since it was Halloween weekend, the department had no one available. So they asked me if I could take a ride with them to show them the exact place where I found the car. If I had gone off track, chances were my car would have left tire tracks. And if they really had to make a murderer, the types of tires used on the car could make the difference between a conviction and an acquittal. And that's why they needed my help. They weren't looking for the car so much. They thought she had already fled the crime scene, but they needed the exact location where she was, where she might have been arrested, so they could possibly take a tire print. Once this was explained to me, I had no problem giving my time if my testimony was going to make a difference in this story. Catch a man or the belts loose, the choice was obvious. So I followed the cops to their car. I climbed into the back seat of their digger. They were right that the car would not be there anymore. But I managed to retrace my steps, so to speak, until I found the corner of grass and tree where the car was. We waited there for a while until another unit showed up to secure the area. Then I ended up being taken back to my apartment. But what if it was after all the bars were closed? And let me tell you, I've never needed a drink so much in my whole life. Luckily, my colleagues and boss were still at the bar where I worked and hung out after closing time and enjoyed a few drinks together. I stopped. They let me in and I told them I had a great scary Halloween story to tell them. That night I was treated to a few free beers that did a great job of detaching me from the story. But going back to my apartment alone was another story. I didn't have a nightmare about finding this woman again. But I thought about it for a long time. Thereafter, the police only called me once to confirm some details about the car and the guy I had seen. But after that, I heard nothing more about it, apart from a few articles in the local papers. And I still think about it today, especially around October and November every year. I still wonder if the cops caught the guy, if he really killed the girl, or if he just tried to take her to the hospital after someone else attacked him. Sometimes I think I really see a ghost every Halloween, but not in the sense that people hear it. I'm not haunted by a translucent spirit floating in the dark corridors. I'm rather haunted by this woman's gaze, the one that gives the impression that she had stopped clinging to life, the one that gave a peaceful air. As if death no longer frightened him. When I was 11 years old, I went on a candy hunt on Halloween night with two of my friends, that I will call Tom and Jerry. It was towards the end of the night, and most of the candy hunters had already gone home, and we decided to visit one last house before heading home. The house we stopped at seemed abandoned for years, but there was a jack-o'-lantern lit on the entrance steps then. Knowing we were making a mistake, we decided to continue. There was a lot of scratches on the front door, but before we could knock on the door, we heard a loud scream coming from inside the house. It wasn't a distorted scream coming from a decoration. It sounded like a scream of terror. The door then slowly creaked open and a gaunt hand out of the darkness reached out to us. We then heard what sounded like a witch's laugh. My friends and I ran away from the house when we heard footsteps running after us, and a haunted voice calling, "Take your candy, my children." We ran to Tom's house and we didn't know if we were still being followed. Jerry and I then decided to stay the night, because we didn't want to take the risk of going out again. I woke up around 2 in the morning and heard that same laugh. I took a look and saw something on the bedroom window. I woke Tom up to watch too. Tom then said, "It looks like an egg," thinking someone was throwing eggs on his house. We both went downstairs and immediately noticed that one of the windows facing the street was broken. Tom's parents weren't home at the time. Jerry then rushed down the stairs. "What's going on?" I heard someone laughing outside. From outside, we heard someone say, "You forgot your candy, my children." We rushed to the nearest window and saw a disturbed-looking woman grab a pumpkin from Tom's porch and toss it over the door. The woman started screaming like a mental patient as she ran to the front door and started kicking and kicking. We escaped through the gate and headed for my house, which was only a pie away. From there we woke up my father and told him what was going on. He called the police. The police arrived shortly afterwards, but they did not find the madwoman. The day after all this, November 1st, Tom called me and man, this crazy woman, she was leaving candy on the chariot port. There was a note that said I had to eat them. My parents took me to the police station. They found piles of bugs in all the candy. I also heard the cops talking to my parents, and I heard something about finding bodies in the old house. We went last night, Halloween night the following year. We saw that same house being demolished. Apparently, in the basement, they found a bunch of knives, ropes and cassettes. This madman was not found until 2 years later. Apparently she lived in the woods behind the house. To everyone listening, please, be careful this Halloween and always check your candy. This happened a few years ago on Halloween night. I am 28 years old, and most people in my group of friends get together for a Halloween party on Halloween weekend. This year, Halloween was on a weeknight, so our party was later, which meant I didn't have anything planned for Halloween night. I live in a small house and had just planned on hanging out and handing out candy to the kids all night. Around 5 p.m., the first children arrived. I would say my neighborhood is pretty average. There are not a crazy number of people. It was pretty regular throughout the night. As time passed, the sun began to dip to set around 6 a.m. It was then, when I was in my living room, that I heard a knock at the front door. It was a strong and powerful blow. Most people's sound, so I really found this a bit surprising. It took me a while to get up. By the time I opened it, there was no one there. I felt bad because I figured a kid must have missed some candy from me when I intended to go open a little faster. I looked around to see if I saw anyone walking down the street, but I didn't see anyone after that. I went back inside. A few other children came to ring the bell over the next hour. Once again, there was a loud knock on the door. I was much faster this time to open, but again, there was no one there. I was starting to think we were playing a bad prank or something. Later that night, it happened again. That was the only time they knocked on the door. Everyone else just rang. So I knew that when I heard the knock, the person would be gone before I answered. The last visitors passed around 8:45 p.m. From 2100, everything became very quiet, so I turned off the lights to signal that I was no longer welcoming visitors. It was about 9:30 when I heard a knock. Again, I ran to the door and opened it as fast as I could, but there was still no one. I was quite annoyed by this situation. Who would knock on my door several times in the space of 3 or 4 hours, only to run away before I could answer? I left my house and took a few steps in my garden. Looking around, I didn't see anyone. I called asking who was there, but of course, no answer. I started redirecting to my house. Arriving at my front door, I suddenly heard a noise in the bushes in front of my house and to my right. I looked at just the right time and could see someone emerge from the bush and head straight for me. This person was a grown man I had never seen. There was maybe 10 feet between him and the front door by mechanical reaction. I ran as fast as I could. When I reached the door, I slammed it open and went in. I closed the door right behind me, and it closed on the arm of the man trying to enter after me. It was just my screen door, so it didn't hurt him too much, but it was enough for him to take his arm off the door and go back outside, which gave me time to slam the front door and lock it before he opened the screen door and tried to get into my house. I yelled that I was calling the police and took my phone out of my pocket to do so. At that moment, I looked out the window and saw the man fleeing through my garden and then into the street. But I called the police anyway. When they arrived, I told them everything. Fortunately, that was enough to keep the man away, as I never saw him again. This story took place many years ago. I was a kid. I think I was 11. I remember on Halloween, every year I would go on a candy hunt with friends. This year, my friend Tyler and I had planned to spend the night with him and then hang out at my place. My house is big enough. We had a cool basement with a big TV to play video games or watch movies. We called our friend Alex from school earlier today. He planned to come that night, but he had to go do Halloween with his sister, so he didn't come with us for the candy hunt. In the evening, Tyler and I went all over our neighborhood and beyond, to the surrounding neighborhoods. We stayed out until about 9 p.m. and got tons of candy. Then we walked back to my house, to the house where my parents were. Tyler and I went down to the basement and played video games while waiting for Alex to arrive. This was before the days when all kids had cell phones, so we didn't know exactly when they would be there. We left the back basement door unlocked so he could come as soon as he arrived, even though my parents were watching a movie upstairs. And we had been in the basement for about 20 minutes when we heard the back door open and close. It was on the edge of the room we were in, and we assumed it was Alex coming in. I called him from where we were and told him to join us, but I didn't hear Alex answer me. I got up and went in the hallway by the back door. There was nobody there. It was weird because I was so sure I heard the door open that I went back to ask Tyler if he heard the door too. He told me that yes, he had heard exactly the same thing as me. So I looked all around the basement one more time, but there was no one there. Maybe it was Alex who opened the door, but he decided to go to the front or something like that happened. Eventually I went back to playing video games with Tyler. 5 minutes later, I thought I heard someone walking down the hallway. Then I heard another door open and close. Where we were completely out of sight of the back door of the hallway, where there are guest rooms. It was as if the door of one of the bedrooms had slammed. I got up and approached, which allowed me to see that one of the doors was closed. I couldn't remember exactly if it had been opened or closed before, but I was pretty sure it was open. I was a little scared and went back to talk to Tyler about it. That's when I heard the back door open and close again. Then I heard Alex's voice. I went out and saw him standing in the doorway. When he saw my face, he asked me what was wrong. I didn't say anything until the three of us were in the living room and we told him everything that had happened. I decided to find my parents and tell them everything that had happened. But before I could, we heard the door behind us open and close again. I went out and saw the bedroom door that had been closed was now wide open. I ran to the back door and locked it quickly. Then I ran upstairs and found my parents. My father went down, looked around and came out. After doing that, he came back and he said he didn't see anything abnormal. I never saw who was in the house that night, but it gives me goosebumps every time I think about it.